President Donald Trump says he'll declare the Strait of Hormuz a U.S. territory, but no federal agency has said what controlling the key oil checkpoint would cost taxpayers. On Friday, Trump said after the U.S. defeats Iran, he'll declare the Hormuz Strait a territory of the United States. Now, the strait is at least the fifth foreign territory that Trump has proposed bringing under U.S. control after Greenland, the Panama Canal, Canada, and several others. Now, the strait is not for sale. It runs through Iranian and Omani territorial waters, and neither country is offering to hand it over. Iran rejects the idea outright. Its judiciary chief called Trump's claim a product of delusions and said that Iran is the owner and ruler of the waterway. What it would come to with if we do control that is the open-ended cost of military presence in that area. The Center Square's Brett Rowland asked U.S. Central Command, the Department of War, and the White House what controlling the strait would cost. No figures were provided. The command referred to the question to the Department of War, which pointed to Secretary of War Pete Hegseth's congressional testimony from May. Now, in that testimony, Hegseth did not give a cost for the blockade for controlling that strait. Now, the question of who pays to keep the strait open, it's not new. During the 1980s tanker war, the U.S. Navy escorted oil tankers through the Gulf and fought Iranian forces in the largest naval surface battle since World War II. Some members of Congress then and now, they pressed for allies who relied on the strait to help cover those costs. 40 years later, the cost of the current operation remains unstated. But Americans are feeling the price of the ongoing conflict beyond the cost of the military. They're feeling it at the pump. AAA has the regular fuel price average at $4.06 a gallon today. Last week, it was at $4.01 a gallon. A year ago, it was at $3.13 a gallon. Now, the Center Square reported last month that gas prices are higher on average in blue states than in red states due to decades of policy choices in those states. That's not the only energy source that's more expensive in blue states than in red states. Energy prices are higher on average in blue states than they are in red states because of energy policies that prioritize renewable resources, such as wind and solar, over reliability and affordability. That's according to two energy groups in a joint report and website released. Now, joining us to discuss this further is Isaac Orr, co-founder and vice president of research for Always On Energy Research. Thanks for taking time with us, Isaac. So tell us what this report shows.
Absolutely. So our report shows that on average, blue states, so those that voted for the Democratic presidential candidate in each of the last two presidential elections, have significantly higher electricity prices than those that voted for the Republican candidate.
Driving this? Is it just somebody votes Democrat and then all of a sudden the prices are higher in that state and somebody votes Republican and the prices are lower? Is it that simple, or what's really behind the driving forces there?
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. It is a policy issue. So the Democratic states tend to enact policies like renewable energy mandates that drive up the cost of electricity because it forces you to buy more wind and solar than the market would otherwise kind of dictate. They also tend to obstruct natural gas infrastructure and prevent the construction of natural gas pipelines and power plants that are needed to maintain reliability on the system. And that's one of the reasons why you've seen such a high increase in the capacity prices in PJM. These states like Virginia require the coal plants to get shut down. They kind of hinder the ability to build new natural gas. And we wonder why we have soaring electricity prices in the northeastern United States. They also have policies like taxes on carbon dioxide or prices on CO2. So ultimately, the blue states tend to layer on 4 or 5 different policies that are all inflationary when it comes to electricity prices that red states just don't do. And that's why we see this giant divergence in the cost of electricity for blue states and red states.
Isaac, I'm in the state of Illinois, and covering the Illinois State House, I watched years ago, like 6 years ago, all the talk about reliable resources versus renewable resources, and the state decided to go towards putting a date certain of when coal-fired power plants were supposed to no longer operate, and natural gas-fired power plants. We were told that this was going to make things more reliable, that this was going to lower costs for everyday Illinois families. How's Illinois looking? And are these policies they put in place helping?
Illinois is above the national average, and frankly, Illinois benefits from the fact that it has a large fleet of existing nuclear power plants. But the regulations that Illinois has recently enacted are going to increase the cost of electricity there. They're requiring more wind, more solar, more battery storage, and they're going to force all of the coal-fired power plants and gas-fired power plants to be off the grid by, I believe it's 2045, unless that gets changed. And that's also another interesting thing that we've noticed in our report, Greg, is the blue states with the high rates have recently, now that affordability is an issue, started to walk back or rescind or water down a lot of the policies that have driven up the cost of electricity in the first place. We've seen it in New York, we see it in Connecticut, Delaware, Massachusetts is reconsidering it or their mandates as well. So I think that there is a growing understanding that a lot of the energy policies that got enacted during the first Trump administration are having a really big negative impact on the states that did that, and they're reconsidering those mandates right now.
And we'll see just how that does in the long run here. Isaac, let's talk a little bit about some of the highest energy rates that you guys have listed in your report. Hawaii, obviously, in the middle of the ocean, it's got a pretty high energy rate there, but talk about like California and Connecticut and Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Are they all on the same page with their policies that seem to be increasing the price of energy for everyday families and businesses?
Yeah, absolutely, they are. You give Hawaii a pass because they're so dependent on imports from the mainland, but all the rest of those states that you just mentioned, basically California and New England, they restrict natural gas, they have renewable energy mandates, they have prices on carbon dioxide, and generally it's just difficult to build things in those states in the first place. So the states with some of the highest mandates for wind and solar actually end up having not very much wind and solar built in their areas because, I mean, when you look at California, they've been trying to build this train, this high-speed rail for over a decade, and I think they're going to get like 20 miles built at some point in the future, and it's cost them billions of dollars. So it's kind of this symptom that we see when it comes to other aspects of the economy, like housing. There's all this red tape, and it prevents the new supply from coming online. So we see a lot of that, but there's also kind of this like general blue state. I don't know, malaise is the right word, where you see a lot of companies, businesses moving to areas with lower taxes, less restrictive operating climates. So that manifests itself in the energy prices as well.
No question, especially as you see, hot summer months and there's more energy usage there. The push for more electric vehicle purchases, more energy use there. This ongoing push for data centers and artificial intelligence, and all of that's going to take some energy. So when you look at these charts, we just looked at the places with the highest energy rates. They look at those with the lowest energy rates, and again, they're red political leaning. Idaho, Nebraska, Louisiana, Oklahoma, North Dakota. When it comes to these investments from these industries that are emerging here, like data centers, put the controversy aside across the country of what's going on there, but which states are they more likely to go ahead and invest in?
Oh, it's going to be the red states because they're going to have lower cost power. There's going to be more options to build new natural gas power plants, which I think is going to be the resource that ends up meeting most of the demand for new data centers or manufacturing. That's a huge part of the demand growth story as well. And those states tend to have more land where people are willing to invest in new technologies. Like North Dakota, for example, there's a bunch of new data centers being planned out there next to the coal facilities. And North Dakota takes a very all of the above approach to energy. And that means keeping their existing coal plants open. So that is going to provide a really big opportunity for those states like North Dakota, Louisiana, I believe Oklahoma and Idaho were on that list as well. They're going to be hubs of innovation and job creation to the extent that the locals want that. And the blue states are going to kind of end up looking even more backward than they kind of do right now.
Isaac, what should policymakers at a state house level, what should they take away from this report?
Well, they should go to bluestateshighrates.com and look at their state profile first and foremost, because that's going to give them the opportunity to see the nuances that are influencing their state policies. But essentially, the more that the legislature tries to intervene and shape the energy policies of their state, you're going to have higher prices that result from that, because you're kind of distorting the natural choices that a market would make. So it's not to say that utilities don't need oversight. They absolutely do. But the more you try to force a square peg into a round hole, you're going to reap the consequences of that. And that's exactly what we see in the states with the highest prices in the country.
Yeah, we're seeing some of the people pushing these policies to cap carbon or to tax, certain types of fossil fuel industries or regulate them to where they close down. We see them saying, hey, it's going to, in the long run, we're going to have cleaner energy. But is that really the case here? Are these renewables really that clean? And is it just going to lead to more costs?
Well, one of the funny things about that, Greg, is that when Virginia rejoined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is the regional cap and trade program for CO2, that probably made the coal plants in West Virginia more viable from an economic standpoint, because they're going to have more ability to send coal-fired electricity into Virginia. So a lot of times, all of this wind and solar generation, yeah, it's going to add some energy to the system. But when the chips are down, you're going to need the coal, natural gas, and nuclear power that's on the grid in order to, maintain reliability during a winter storm Fern or a winter storm, Uri. So this is essentially, the wind and solar is an additional cost on top of an already reliable grid. And what we're seeing is the blue states are now hitting this point to where they're starting to question whether that additional cost that people are actually paying on their bills every month is ultimately worth it.
Now, Isaac, not all blue states fell into that category. Tell us a little bit about North Carolina.
Oh, yeah. North Carolina is interesting. It's the only red state, quote unquote, that we examined that has a 100% carbon free mandate. And that applies to the Duke utilities. So essentially, the large investor owned utilities in the state are required to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions by 2050. And as a result, we've seen that those utilities have seen larger increases in their electricity prices than the co-ops, the rural cooperatives, and the municipal utilities that are operating in the state. So we see that, policy matters. Policy has an influence on prices, and the electricity companies that are the most heavily regulated and forced to adopt these renewable energy mandates, we see higher prices as a result of that. So that's why you've seen in North Carolina, they've decided to roll back some of those interim requirements. So basically, they had a midpoint goal that they were forcing the utilities to reduce their emissions by. They repealed that because they understood that it was going to increase costs.
It's an incredible report. And again, it shows 86% of states with electricity prices above the national average reliably blue leaning politically, while 80% of the 10 states with the lowest electricity reliability are red. Isaac Orr, co-founder and vice president of research for Always On Energy Research. Greatly appreciate your time. And we'll be back with more here on The States.